everyone, Dr. here. Today we're going to look at how to evaluate the author's point of view in a given text. Now you can read these learning objectives from the TEAS study manual, but I'm going to point out the most important things that you need to know. Okay? Now, in order to accurately evaluate the author's point of view, you need to think about who the author is, where the author is from, what kind of educational background the author has, because all that can influence how the author thinks of a certain person or a certain topic. Next, what organization the author represents or may be associated with. So the affiliation of the author is also important because whatever the author writes is probably for the best interest of the organization that he or she represents. Next, where the writing is published. So that's an also important piece of information to have to evaluate the point of view. Let's talk about scientific journals because I'm very familiar with the field. So a lot of the scientific journals, they call themselves peer-reviewed journals, but they have very low quality. Everybody can publish their studies on those journals because the peer review process is very weak, right? So if you see an article published by one of those journals, then whether the results are accurate, reliable, that's questionable. But if you see an article published in reputable peer-reviewed journals, so for example, Science or Nature, some of the really well-known journals, then the results from that article are probably pretty reliable. Last, whether the information presented is a fact or opinion. So if the author, stays neutral on a topic, then the author will probably present facts, right? And oftentimes opinions from all sides, right? They really try to include all the different perspectives in the text. But if the author has a very strong point of view, then the author may tend to kind of be biased against other opinions. And the author tends to present his or her opinions in a very strong way, right? Try to convince you of the same idea, same belief. Some students tend to get confused by the purpose of the text and the author's point of view. So those are two different things. The purpose of the text is the primary intention, right? And that's what the text, what the author hopes to achieve. So that's the goal of that writing piece. And usually it's more explicit than the point of view. So it's often provided in the beginning or in the end, right? As either introduction or conclusion or summary. Now the point of view, on the other hand, can be very implicit, not very obvious. Right? Now, the author's point of view is the author's personal opinions and beliefs. It's often associated with the author's bias and prejudice against something. Like we touched on earlier, the point of view is often influenced by the author's or the publisher's background. All right, now based on that, let's do a quick practice. So I have 5 different titles here, and I want you to kind of read the title and identify whether the title gives you a positive feeling, a negative feeling, or a neutral feeling. And then I will reveal who wrote the piece, who came up with these titles. You can really see the association between the author's point of view and the author's background or organization. Does the author have a positive, negative, or neutral point of view? All right, let's get started. Okay, number 1 and number 5 That's a negative point of view, right? And you can tell from the word choice. Number one, Monsanto's big lie, right? Lie has that very negative connotation. And number five, Monsanto busted. Again, this has a negative connotation so that you know that the author probably doesn't like Monsanto or doesn't agree with the company's point of view. Okay, number two, impact of Roundup Ready crops. So this title is pretty neutral, right? It just says impact, which is a very neutral word. It doesn't say negative impact or positive impact, right? If I add negative impact here, then that author has a negative point of view on this product of Roundup. If I change it to beneficial impact of Roundup Ready crops, then that will be a positive point of view. Number four is very similar. It's also a neutral point of view, right? It just says Monsanto responds to glyphosate cancer allegations. So this is a fact, right? The company responds to the allegations, and that's it, right? The author didn't mention whether Monsanto is responsible for those allegations or not. And number three, glyphosate helps preserve the environment and biodiversity. That has a very positive tone, right? It helps the nature, helps, conserve the environment and conserve biodiversity. All right, now once you see the different tones, different point of view, let's look at who came up with these titles. So number five, negative point of view, right? They're written by Sierra Club and Greenpeace, which are well-known activist groups, right? Those are pro-environment groups. And Roundup is a chemical product that we use in agriculture to kill certain pests. I'm not going to say what because there is a passage on that and I can't give you the answer. Number two, that title is from some student assignment I found online. So these students are asked to do some research on Roundup. So they don't have any bias against it, right? They need to remain objective when they write. They have to gather all the information, positive, negative, all that facts and put them together to complete this assignment, right? So this is very neutral. And number three, that's the only positive title among the five, right? And guess who came up with the title? The manufacturer, which is Monsanto. Monsanto makes the chemical Roundup. Okay, number four, Monsanto responds to the allegations. That's from a news outlet. News outlet normally has to remain neutral, right? They can't already have a bias or, emotional feelings about certain persons or companies. So they have to remain objective, kind of like a number two, right? When students put together the information. So that's also a neutral title. So you can see the author's background and the organizations they present are closely tied to what kind of point of view will be expressed in the text. Okay, now here are the questions that you may see on TEAS. I grayed out the last two questions because I think those questions are more for the study manual, for just kind of having students learn why it's important to evaluate a source, right? Because sometimes the information is accurate, sometimes it's not. So you need to make sure you research the source. If it's a reliable source, then the information is probably okay. But if it's not, then you might not want to use that information. Again, I think those two things you just need to know why, but I don't think the questions will ask you those reasons. So the questions will probably be more like the first two, right? They will give you examples of the sources and you need to identify which source will be the most reliable, or what feature would support the reliability of a source. So this is how they test your ability, your knowledge on how to evaluate the credibility of a source. So these are probably the questions that you will see on a real TEAS test. Okay, first paragraph is you have about 60 seconds to read it. So this is pretty long. There are 2 paragraphs in here. If you need more time, just pause and finish it and then come back. Now, if everyone is ready, I'm going to move on to the first question. Based on the context of the passage, which does the word herbicide mean? So the word is highlighted here. So herbicide is what this product Roundup is, right? So Roundup is a weed killer. It kills weed. So that's what herbicide means. Agricultural products that we use to kill unwanted plants. So the correct answer is C. Okay, question 2. All right, the information is in the second paragraph. So this is the group that presents agriculture growers, retailers, landscaping, and golf course workers. So you can tell that these people rely on glyphosate, right? They use glyphosate for farming and selling them at stores. They use glyphosate for landscaping or the nice grass on a golf course. So because they rely on the product, they probably have a very positive point of view on glyphosate. And you can see from what the spokesman said, right? Glyphosate remains one of the safest and most effective tools these people use. So some of the words with positive connotation, right? Safest, most effective. The users use glyphosate to manage economically damaging weeds. So the weeds are bad. So if we use glyphosate to control weeds, to kill weeds, then glyphosate is good. It's good for conservation. The correct answer is A, right? They believe the chemical is safe and they support the use of glyphosate. So they have the opposite point of view as the Center for Food Safety, right? The Center for Food Safety, you probably have guessed, is a pro-environment activist group, right? So they challenge EPA's approval of glyphosate. So that means they do not like glyphosate. They do not believe that glyphosate should be approved for use in the US. Okay, next question. Question 3. Within the text of the case, which of the following sources would best provide reliable information on glyphosate? So imagine if you are not involved in any of those groups, EPA or the court or Center for Food Safety or the agriculture groups. You're just a bystander and you want to know whether glyphosate is really that bad. Which source would you use to make your own assessment? Would you use the information posted on Monsanto-Bayer website? Not really, right? Because they make glyphosate. So of course, they're going to say good things about glyphosate. Information posted on the website of the Center for Food Safety. Now we know that the Center for Food Safety sued EPA, right? So even though we should always protect the environment, some of the activist groups may have some extreme point of view, right? They may exaggerate the negative effects of certain chemicals. So although I like the idea of protecting the environment, we probably need to be a little bit careful about what they say, right? We want somebody who's objective, who's not involved in the court case. So I wouldn't choose B either. C, information published on a reputable scientific journal by researchers studying glyphosate. So that's the correct answer. Now, usually when people publish scientific papers, they have to have a conflict of interest statement. So normally they have to claim no conflict of interest, meaning they're not involved with, for example, this particular chemical, so that they can remain objective when they conduct the studies. So C would be the best source for information on glyphosate. Now, how about D? Information posted on the personal blog of someone who is a medical doctor. Now, this part is pretty good, but the information is posted on the personal blog, right? A personal blog, it's not very scientific, right? The information is not reviewed by anyone. So, the doctor could post something that he believes in, right? Which might not be very scientific, but mostly, reflect his opinions. So we can't really ensure that the information provided by this medical doctor is reliable. So I would not use that information. Now, if I change this to information posted on, say, American Medical Association website, now that's a reliable source for information, right? Because that's a reputable organization. Okay, now I'm going to pause the timer here. So this is the last question. The passage is very short, and there's only one question associated with it. Here we go. All right, this is about the use of surgical masks. So question 1, assuming you are someone who is looking for single-use surgical masks, which of the following sources would be, I don't know why I have so many typos in this video, sorry guys, would be the most reliable source as to what brands you can trust. Now, the trust is the key word, right? So that means the products are made very well, right, and have been tested by the regulatory authority. So would you use B, Amazon reviews? No, those reviews are not accurate. Amazon reviews are definitely not a good indicator. C, YouTube social media commercials. Now we know the commercials are probably paid by the manufacturers, right? So they already have an interest in selling you the product. So I wouldn't trust the information from the commercials. D, recommendations from a blog of a medical doctor. The blog is very personal, right? So everybody can post pretty much any information on the blog. It's just not a good source for, accurate information. So the correct answer is A, FDA website, right? The EUA is issued by FDA. So FDA knows which manufacturers make a product that passes all the requirements, right? In fact, it says here, surgical masks that have been confirmed by FDA to meet the criteria, right? We talk about, meet the standards, are included below in Appendix A. So that's the source that you should go to when you're looking for single-use surgical masks. All right, guys, that's the end of this lesson. And again, good job, guys. You are getting even closer to being fully prepared for TEAS. Keep up the good work, and I'll see you next time.